So going into this week, there's a few things to note. First and foremost, it's NFP week. That gives us some volatility later in the week as those data points start to come out. The other thing is Thursday. Thursday this week is the New York Stock Exchange, at least. Equities are closed for Jimmy Carter's funeral. So I'm not sure about the futures market. I would imagine that the futures market is probably a half day with Europe remaining open. I haven't actually looked into it, but the thing is, when days like that are when equities are closed, I'm not trading them anyway because the volume's going to be very light. And usually, I don't really want to don't really want to trade those days when I don't have correlations with equities during the day. So just something I generally avoid. There could if it is open, and again I haven't even looked, but if it is open, there could certainly be possibilities and potential there on that day. But I'm gonna just take it as a holiday because we rarely get those. So going into this week, with that out of the way, I don't have a ton of bias. I think I'm still in the camp of looking for the range of the inside week to be taken back and at least start getting up into this gap based on what happened into the lows last week. But I think it needs to be said as well that we did sweep last week's low on both indexes. That does shift the weekly to one time framing down. So there is some caution here as far as what the higher time frames are doing versus what the medium and lower time frames are doing. So there's two different things basically going on. So basically we've shifted the weekly down, we broke balance to the downside, but at the same time the daily ranges were able to recover that and actually close back inside that prior weekly balance range and close the week back inside the inside week range, which we tried to break down from and we failed. So looking at it this way from a short-term perspective and from a short-term trading perspective, I'm primarily focused on ES. First things first, I'm primarily focused on the inside week low, which is Friday's IB high, as well as this nice LVN that we carved out here. Primarily focused on this area down here, down into 52s, basically using this as the line in the sand for buyers, if we have any early attempts to sell this lower. So looking to see if, we can hold this structure that we put in here. So we have these overlapping value areas, which always turn out to be important, as well as, the lower part of the distro on this trend day up, on this triple distribution trend day up. So basically the immediate attention here is going to be on the weekly high, the RTH high, which is right here, which was set on Friday. If we're auctioning above this, basically off rip, off of, off Globex, and we see, a really strong response and we get a lot of continuation right away off of this trend day up and this multi-distribution trend day higher, then I'm going to be looking to get us back into 6,030, basically take back the ETH range that we put in here up into the ETH highs, up into, I should say, 6,030 area, as well as the 20-day moving average, simple moving average right here. And ultimately what I'd like to see us get back and try and auction into this gap up into 6060 if we can, if we're basically getting above 5990s. So using this as a line in the sand, any immediate sells down into 65 to 52, I want to see a really strong response from buyers. I want to see a lot of volume come in. I want to see buying with intention. I want to see a lot of lift basically away from this fast with good volume. And I think that would signal to me, assuming we can keep closing higher periods above 65s, that would signal to me that this area is probably going to hold. And, I'll continue to look for the long trade back up and then fill back in this range and ultimately try and get up and test this gap and make a decision from there. I won't get into too much detail about the lows because honestly, I think last week we talked a lot about this. There's not really much more to it. I've been looking for the long trade down into the lows, pretty much all last week. I was looking to be a buyer down here. We got it. We got the move back up. And now basically for continuation, we want to see 65s hold down into 52s into the meat of this weekly distribution down here. Potentially we could see, with data releases, we could see some volatility and some nasty snaps back down into 30. But I mean, if we get down into this weekly POC area, I'd basically want to see their strong response back up, and start to be a buyer again if we recover 50s. I think if we're starting to offer below the meat of the distribution in here, below 50s, I think these lows could be in trouble again. So that's just how I'm going to look at this. So generally have an upside bias on ES and NQ from here, but I think we have a pretty clear area where we'd need to be really cautious about trying to be a buyer again, and some levels that we'd want to see recovered pretty fast if we do want to stay on the buy side of this tape. So that's how I'm looking at ES. The NASDAQ, similar situation. So again, we're in short term. So weekly has shifted to framing down. Daily is in 4-day balance as well, but it's going to be the same thing for me really here. So we set the RTH weekly high on Monday, so up into 570s. Again, immediate attention really is going to be up here. So if we're moving off rip, like right off Globex right on Monday, if we're moving, right above these highs, then again, I'm going to look for the ETH range of last week to be taken back and cleaned up. This is very thin volume. So generally, we could easily backfill this if we get a bit of a squeeze above those old highs, old RTH highs that we had from last week on both indexes. So I'll look for the move back to 740s, and then ultimately I'd like to see us get back in. This is a very small gap, but we do actually have an RTH gap here. I want to see us get back into 800s, 870s, 860s, 870s, basically fill all this back up and start to auction above. Line in the sand for me on NASDAQ is pretty much last week's POC. So 375 early in the week, Monday. I was talking about this before it was ever even weekly POC. I was talking about how this level filled. It was important on tape, to me at least, the entire week. It turned into weekly POC, so clearly from an auction standpoint, it was very important. This is going to be basically my line in the sand for buyers. So I think, again, using the lower part of this distribution into weekly POC, 375 to 350-ish area, I think if there's any attempts to sell this down, we need to see that. We need to see that bid. We need to see absorption into the lows at 375 and at 60s to 52 on ES. We want to see that absorption. We want to see a good bid form some structure, and then some fast moves away with high volume to get us back above 470s and get that upside continuation. Same thing here. I mean, I think if we start to auction below 375s to 350, basically this range in here, I think if we start auctioning below, we're potentially at risk of revisiting last week's lows. So generally want to maintain that upside bias. There's going to be some pretty clear things that we want to see this week for that to happen. I think from a levels perspective, it's fairly clear as far as what we want to see hold in the short term. That's what I'm going to be looking for, at least. I'd like to, I think I'd like to see these levels hold, and I'd like to see this upside continuation early before NFP. I'd rather not see us balance into NFP and then basically leave it up to those prints to really get those trades, because I think that would turn into a really messy week that's not going to give us a lot of areas to pair risk against. Like, I'd really like to see these play out early, get us into the upside early, and then if we can just kind of have a decent week going into Friday and then not really worry about what the NFP print is, if we have some runners for the lows or some risk from lower, then we can basically just leave it there and see if we break higher, or if we're gonna, or if NFP sells us, whatever's gonna happen. I have no idea what's gonna happen with NFP. So that's primarily it. Trying to keep this really quick, really simple. As far as the outlook goes, all of this will be in my notes, but I think, for this week, hopefully it's fairly clear. We at least have some areas where we can lean on to manage risk and watch for reactions. It was quite messy last week, but I think just keeping my view fairly simple on two basic locations, that's how I'm really going to try and play this week. And if we can get some decent reactions, then I think for me it'll be one of those weeks where I try and put a fat pitch into those areas, and then just see if we can get it, see if we can get the rotation, just hold it and see if we can get that move back up. And then ultimately, if I'm wrong, if if there's a reason to join the sell side, then I'll definitely flip. So last week I really wasn't looking to sell it. This week I'm still not looking to sell it. But I do think, with the weekly shifting, the potential there for higher time frames for, these lows to be at risk again, I think it is potentially there. And I think that would come from 375s offering very quick, offering heavy, as well as 50s not being able to bid really. And ultimately snapping below 30s, I think these lows are at risk. And then ultimately, we do have this gap fill, which could happen as well, but not really looking for that. If it's there, then I'll join it, but still more so looking for upside here. So that's the week I'm looking at. Obviously, day to day is how we'll play it, and it's going to be tricky with NFP down in the latter half of this week, but hopefully that helps at least.